My name is Willie Mitchell, and I was part of Willie Banks and the Messengers, and I'm now present a part of the Messengers.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Jackson, Mississippi.
And what age did you start in the quartet singing?
Oh man, I started singing when I was about 10 years old in the choir at church, and when I turned 17, I was playing bass guitar. And Willie Banks came to a program that we was having one night, and he saw me play, and he asked me would I join him. So at that time, he talked to my father, but I had to get the approval from the old man. So my father let me went with him. And we traveled, man, all over the country. And we didn't have no record. We just went. Banks had a good contacts in different places. We went places like New York, Florida, California. And during that whole time, I was a little too young to be traveling, on the road constantly. So we just sung on the weekend. And he would try to have me back home to go to school on Monday morning. So that was pretty hard, but we did it. And we was one of the pioneer groups that went out on the road. I mean, we went and we suffered. I lost a family, a wife and a family, but I wanted to stay with gospel. Banks lost a wife and family, but he didn't stop singing. He kept singing, and we kept going till God blessed us in doing what we was doing.
So how long have you been in quartet business, so to speak?
47 years.
Say it again, it's like I've been in quartet.
I've been in quartet business for 47 years.
So you've noticed a lot of the impact that quartet singing has had, especially on modern day music and stuff like that. So kind of talk about that, like how you watched it change. What we're really trying to do is preserve the legacy of it. We don't want people to forget the work that you have done as well as your contemporaries.
Yeah. Well, now I've noticed a change when it began to change with contemporary music. I like all music, contemporary, gospel, traditional gospel. But when contemporary came in, it took a toll on the younger generation. But traditional gospel singing is where I started. And I love traditional gospel singing. And that's where I'll always be.
So tell us some of the music that influenced you when you were a boy. You said at 10 years old. What was it that made you, jump out and say, this is what I want to do? Like, what was it? Any particular artist?
Yes. Artists like Julius Cheeks. Maybe some people might be able to forgot Julius Cheeks. But man, it was one of the best singers. He sung with the Nightingales. And he was the lead singer for the Nightingales. And he had such an impact in his voice and in his singing to black people. He could relate to black people. He would tell a story, then he'll sing about that story. So people like Tucker with the Dixie Hummingbirds, and Jeter that was with the Swan Silvertone. So those people really made an impact on my life. And James Cleveland.
All right, so tell us this, like we're trying to paint a picture of what it's like coming from Mississippi. What was Mississippi like? What was your life like in Mississippi? And how hard was it for you to go out on tour and then see all these different cities and come back home? Tell us what that was like, because at such a young age, you had to grow up quick.
Yeah, you're right. You have to grow up quick, and you have to start coming into your adulthood while you're a teenager, because that's when I started, right out of high school. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to sing just that bad. So I didn't go to college. But I grabbed the hold to singing, man, and I've been singing all, since then. And singing is my life.
That's your gift, so you got to share it.
Yeah.
So, nominated for a Grammy in 1980.
No, it was 1979.
Okay.
We was nominated for the song "For the Wrong I Done," and from that song, we recorded another one called "God Is Still in Charge." And believe it or not, when we first recorded "God Is Still in Charge," it took it 2 years before it started getting played. Because when we started singing it first, people would just look at us and wouldn't say anything. So we was kind of discouraged about singing it. But I guess God just put it in us to keep singing it, and finally it caught on.
So what was different about the song that made them look at you? Was it just the arrangement of it? What was it?
It was the style and the music that we had behind it.
Okay, take a chance, all right. And one of the questions is, you left Jackson Southerners. Is that part of your story? I'm not sure.
Yes, Willie Banks started singing with the Jackson Southerners. That's where he was originally from. And they had a breakup in 1968. And that's when Willie Banks began to form another group. In 1969, that's when I came in the picture. And the first group that we had, we called it Willie Banks and the Southerners. But we went to Texas to Don Roby at Peacock Recording Company to record. And the recording company already had the Jackson Southerners, so they didn't want two groups with the Southerners in it. So they gave us that name, Willie Banks and the Messengers.
So is there anything you want to say to the music community as a whole about, how important quartet singing is to you and why, we would need to preserve the legacy? Is there anything that, sometimes it's something that you just have on your chest that you feel about it,
Yeah, well, I feel like we should all try to preserve the legacy of traditional gospel singing, just like they did the legacy with blues singing. Because, blues singing one time was going down until they did something to bring it back. So, I've been singing gospel all my life, and this is all I'm going to do,
All right, and one last thing. What kind of advice would you give to these up-and-coming groups that's coming out there, being that you're a veteran of it, you're the OG, as they say?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them as far as business, personal, that you learned in this whole process?
Well, I learned to be straightforward with what you're doing. And first of all, put God first in it. Because if you don't put God in it, it ain't gonna work. I had to find that out the hard way. And believe me, if you don't put God in it, it ain't gonna work out for you. But if you put God in it and follow God's lead and ask Him to guide you, then you can about pull it out.
And we're working on together here with Tyrone Porter. Anything you want to say about Tyrone and his efforts in the whole quartet legacy?
Yes, well, I love Tyrone. He's one of a kind. And to see him working on this legacy, it really does my heart good. And I want to say this, I'm behind him 100%. Anything he wants me to do, all I got to do is ask, and I'm willing to be there for him. Because I think it's a good thing that he's doing. And we need to preserve our heritage. And gospel singing is our heritage.
Great. I just want you to just drill down a little bit more on Mississippi since we're here originally from
From
Mississippi. So I just need you to kind of paint the picture. It was in like what you said, early 50s and 60s. Some of the groups that we kind of interviewed and during gospel music workshop talked about some of the challenges and struggles they had on the road when they would go into other cities. Can you paint the picture of what was going on during that time in Mississippi in that 60s when you were actually performing?
Oh yeah.
Like some of the, just give me one instance of a challenge that occurred.
Well, back in the 60s, it was hard for quartet singers to find a place to stay. You know, other than people would help them. Some people would let us stay in their homes, but you had just black hotels. There wasn't no Holiday Inn and Days Inn, and you know. Now they had a few black hotels, like in Memphis. You had the Peabody, and you had the other hotel where Martin Luther King had got shot. What's the name of the hotel? Lorraine. Now we stayed there a lot, but it wasn't many places. And restaurants, oh man, we used to have a problem with, going to eat in different restaurants.
We drove out here from Atlanta to Mississippi because we felt it was important. This is like a milestone state in terms of music. So kind of talk about your home state and what its contributions to, music, not just music, but specifically quartet and gospel music. Like, if you could just talk about that, like as far as some of your other people that you grew up with. I really want to paint a picture because it's like this is the 50s and 60s, and there's a lot of things that we don't have. Okay. So there's a lot of things that came out of Mississippi that I think we give more credit than, So this is your voice. This is your Mississippi voice. We want to talk about Malaco. We want to talk about other artists that came out of Mississippi. Give us your take on that.
Well, there was a lot of artists that came out of Mississippi that back in that day, like the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi. You had the William Brothers, the Jackson Southernaires. You had the Pilgrim Jubilees. They're from here in Mississippi. So just like B.B. King was right up the road there in Indianola. So his brothers, all of his brothers, they once sung gospel, but they was successful straight from Mississippi. So Mississippi have always been a milestone for music, gospel as well as, the secular artists.
Yeah, I had a lot to say.
Yeah. You got groups like the Can Spirituals, the Christian Airs, the Bolden Brothers. All of these groups, man, are from Mississippi. Mississippi, homegrown and bred.
We admire the contribution Mississippi had.
Yeah.
And just you traveling. We're going to go to other states and kind of find out from some people too. And I know one of them, which I was surprised with, because I'm from New York.
Okay.
I realized that you mentioned New York as one of your destinations. Talk to us about New York, like let's say the shows you did up there, the promoters that you dealt with up there. I want to get kind of a picture of what it was like, traveling.
Yeah, well, when we first went to New York, let me say this. Going across the George Washington Bridge scared me. I was scared to go across it. But the promoters in New York was real nice people. We had a promoter there by the name of Big Dan. Back then he did the Apollo, and you would sing in the Apollo Theater 3 times a day at that time. Like you go Saturday morning, you'd be there at 9 or 10 o'clock. Then they had another program started at 2:30. Then they had another program started at 7:30 that night. So New York was one of the main places where you had to really get known, where you had to really put out in New York. And New York is the type of place where you just can't go there and half step, because they done seen it all. So when you get there, you got to have your stuff together. In New York and also in California, the same way. Out in LA, they done just about seen all the singing that, that's going on. So you just got to have your thing together when you get to those places.
Okay, anything about Detroit?
Yeah, man, Detroit was the Motor City. I used to love Detroit. We stayed on Canfield Street back in the day. And let me remind you now that black people couldn't stay anywhere during this time. They had certain places that they had to stay. And in Detroit, we had the Canfield Hotel on Canfield Street.